Perfect, perfect. All right, all right. Well, welcome everyone to the Campus Night Cafe almost said podcast, excuse me, a webinar where we will be going over how to get students to critically think and teach them some active learning skills and how you can use technology to help them discover that and be more effective in class and then out of class when they're bringing these ideas out to the world. So we'll be covering a good bit of that today and some of the best practices and what you can do specifically to make that happen. We'll give some specific examples, and we have two of our panelists here that I'd like to introduce. We have Arianne Hainsey, who is an educator turned instructional resource consultant, and also Dr. Armstrong, who is an educator and researcher that's interested in self-regulation models, especially with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder in teens and also young adults. So we are excited to have both of them here today. So thank you both for joining us. With that said, I do want to also talk about excuse me one moment. There we go. So let me get this back to the top here. So something else that I want to talk to you about is the objectives for today. So we're going to discuss the relationship between critical thinking and curiosity, and also how these can be used to be effective and ways to implement these really well and foster creativity, curiosity, critical thinking, and then also the ability to use that technology to make that happen. So I'm going to also be sending you a recording of this webinar, so you can always reference it back, the gift card that we promised, as well as the the certificate of completion, so that you'll have that available if you can use that. And we'll also be sending more resources for you to be able to reference and some more specific activities, like I mentioned earlier, to really tackle these effectively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Armstrong, where he can get us started with talking about why critical thinking is so important and what you can do to make that even better in your courses.
All right. Well, can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, great. All right, well, the first thing I'm going to do is, in acknowledgement that you all are doing what we're doing, balancing the end of the semester holiday with trying to get a webinar in, just saying happy holidays to y'all. All right, so we're going to cover a lot of buzzwords that you guys have heard. Many of you are doing these things already in your classroom. I want to give you a few examples and hopefully end up by the end of the day with you having some specific ideas about how you could tackle integrating some things into your courses. Can I open up with this poll question? Anna, could you pop that up? Have you ever been lecturing and you're trying to figure out whether your students are with you? Do they know what they're supposed to know at this point? Are they ready for the next level of information? I'm wondering, how much would it help you if you were able to know how your students are doing with the target material as you were presenting? So we got three choices here. Could have gone with some other things, but we kept it simple. Just said a lot. It would help a lot. I'd change what I would do in the moment if I had evidence the students either got it or didn't get it as I presented. Some, I don't really like changing things on the fly, but I might change what I prepare and offer for the next class based on what I learned today. And then none. I have a pretty doggone effective presentation style, and honestly, students can either jump on board or get left behind. Their learning is on them. All right, so just go ahead and give a quick answer to that. And then Anna, maybe give another couple of seconds. We can close it up and take a look at some results.
Perfect. And while you're answering this poll question, I do want to point out if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panelists or us here at Campus Night, we'd love to have that question. So you can find the Q&A box there in the Zoom controls that you can ask your question, and we'll answer it at the end of the webinar.
All right, so it sounds like it would be helpful to a lot of you either right at the moment when you need to know, or in between days, perhaps as you're preparing for the next lecture. I've been in that same boat, and in fact, I'm still in that boat after 30 years of doing this, where some days I want to be able to change on the fly, and other days I need to get through my stuff. And I got to get through that material, and I will do my best to help people with some catch up at the next class. But, you're all in a different situation, but knowing what your class understands could be helpful. So polling them in the middle of a lecture would be great. We all are teaching critical thinking in some way. We know that we're not just providing a vocabulary and maybe a current model and expecting to be done. We're trying to get people to be lifelong learners. We've got a lot of issues right now. Probably all of you are dealing with students who are sorting through the various kinds of information being presented by all the media sources that they get bombarded with. And so you're trying to help them learn skills. How can they discriminate useful information? I'm in a social science. I'm a clinical psychologist. I teach a lot of psychology courses like behavior modification, behavior therapy. I teach an ethics course to graduate students. I teach abnormal psychology, but some are survey courses, some are more skills-oriented courses. But I tell my students, regardless of what I'm teaching, the same thing that I was told at the beginning of my graduate training, which is that everything you're about to learn at this institution, everything you're going to read, all the lecture materials that will be presented to you, everything should be chunked inside your head as helping with one of these major 4 goals of science. Does this information help you describe something? Not a very high bar. There's a lot of descriptive models out there in all of our disciplines. Does it help you explain something? Well, now the bar is getting a little tougher. Do we have an explanatory model that we can use to explain why people pull their hair out or self-injure, or why people make the decisions that they do about aggression or some other issue? Now, in my field, it gets really interesting when we look at our models. And ask, does it help with predicting something? Does it help with controlling, or in our language, treating something? And I don't care if you're in geology or communication or whatever, but you need to look at what you're teaching your students, and they need to look at what they're learning in terms of, does it help them with these 4 goals? So I wanted to present that to you as just kind of an example of a theme that you could offer to your students as they sort through the various material presented to their text in their lecture. Let's hit the next slide. Now, if we're trying to get this next generation ready to tackle some unsolved problems, maybe improve what we're already doing or what we already know, if you're like me, you're teaching in an area that really benefits from cross-disciplinary work, and sometimes taking a deep dive in somebody else's discipline. So I think if you can get your students experience with interdisciplinary work, give them exposure to examples of how other disciplines approach answering questions, you're going to give them something useful. And so you give them a model perhaps the first time around, then you start involving them, maybe they can apply the model, and eventually you give them a task where they get to work at their desk or at home and do it themselves. I'm thinking this is a familiar approach for most of you, maybe all of you, but I just want to make sure that you all have names for these things. Let's go to the next slide. So we have benefits to the discipline. When I'm thinking about my graduate students and my upper level courses, it really helps for the students to see how incremental logical advancements help research contribute something. And then also, if they get an example of a paradigm shift where there's a brand new way of conceptualizing or tackling a problem, you've given your students an opportunity to see how change can either be very logical and progressive or can be really crazy different. Now, we also want to provide some benefits for students. In particular, a big theme, and you all have it, creating lifelong learning, right? We want people to ask questions, to learn how to gather information, to design and test solutions, and then communicate effectively about what they're discovering. If we can do that for our students, with our students, if they end up being able to do that when they leave our institution, I think people will feel like they got a good experience in their education. It improves their decision-making, their problem-solving, and improves their research skills. And overall, we're deepening curiosity and creativity, two of our very favorite buzzwords. I love those buzzwords. I use them all the time. I hope you guys do too. I want my students to be curious. I want them to be creative. Next slide, please. So you've seen this before. If students are good at critical thinking, they're going to get better grades. And they're going to build a stronger and longer lasting knowledge base. And they're going to be able to communicate with one another about what they find. Let's give them practice. Give them practice in the classroom. Give them practice with their homework. Be very purposeful as you approach the tasks that you design and how you use your valuable classroom time. So we want to try and give you some tools to do that. Blake?
All right, thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Thank you for sharing. And what we're going to move into next is Arianne Hainsey is going to actually walk us through some active learning strategies, also creating opportunities for discovery while doing that. And then moving on to promoting problem-solving skills and also giving some really specific examples of how she's used this in her courses in the past. So I'm excited to hear about it. Arianne, I'm going to pass it on to you now.
All right, thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Yes, I see a nod. Okay, great. So thank you so much, Dr. Armstrong. Thank you, Blake. I think Dr. Armstrong laid such a beautiful groundwork here for us to talk about how we're going to deepen curiosity, how we're going to get to that state of creativity with our students. And one of the most impactful ways we can do that is by promoting active learning in our classrooms. So as a base definition for active learning, we have instructional approach where students actively rather than passively interact with material through discussions, problem solving, small group activities, and or writing assignments, case studies, role playing, and other similar activities. The list truly goes on and on. We have dozens of active learning techniques that we can use in the classroom. So now I'm going to open up a poll to you all to see which active learning activities, and again, this is a short list among the dozens that we can talk about in a several series of webinar. But in this small sample, which approaches have you used in your classroom within the past year? We have discussions. This could be discussion boards in Canvas if you're teaching an online class, or it could be live discussions there in the classroom. Small group activities, short writing assignments in class, case studies, problem-based learning, role playing. And you can select all that apply for these. Okay. So our poll has been closed and we have a really nice diverse set of responses here. So the majority, but not by much, put down discussions. And then we have small group activities, short writing assignments with problem-based learning, then case studies and role playing. All right, great. Thank you all so much for your responses to that poll. And if we can, and I would also like to say as well with active learning, we know what it is, but we want to know why. Why active learning? We want to promote problem solving, curiosity, creativity, all those wonderful things. And on top of that, what studies have shown is active learning leads to long-term retention. So that is a huge marker. We want our students to be lifelong learners through their curiosity, but also retain the information that they're learning now. So then we get to opportunities for discovery. Excuse me. So for me, promoting discovery means promoting curiosity, first and foremost. And we do this through a method called discovery learning. So students are going to take ownership of what they're learning. This is one of the pillars for me for teaching my language classes. That is my discipline. I am a foreign language teacher, and I want students to take ownership of their learning. I want them to work on their own. I want them to conduct research in those upper level classes. I want them to ask questions at all levels, draw their own conclusions. So this is going to lead to problem solving skills and among many other benefits. So as I picture discovery learning, I picture it this way: promoting curiosity. You want to promote curiosity, but how do you do that? My favorite way, and the way that I've seen in which I've received positive feedback throughout the years, is by just being excited about the topic that you're teaching, having passion for what you're teaching. You don't have to be jumping up and down up for joy, but giving that extra bit of love to what you're teaching. The students feel that and they resonate with that, and it promotes them to be just a little bit more curious about what it is you're talking about up there. We have self-motivated learning. After all of that, we typically see our students then wanting to learn more on their own. They want to research or want to practice vocabulary. They want to do all of these great things that's going to help them deepen their understanding of whatever the topic may be. So this is really going to lay the groundwork. All of this, the excitement to self-motivated learning, we're laying the groundwork for their curiosity, and we might even see better results from our students. All right. And how do these learning styles promote problem solving? So in this slide, really we're focusing on how discovery learning is promoting problem solving and critical thinking. So here we have that skills are developed through repetition, measured success. With systematic exposure to problems in a controlled learning environment, students will develop the ability to critically analyze problems through investigation, visualization, collaborative discussion, and problem solving. And in my case with my language classes, this happens at all levels. And specifically, one of my strongest assignments for my advanced courses, when we start getting into advanced with our essay writing, and they really are nailing down those skills, and they're starting to see the spelling details. If it's Spanish, they're seeing where accents belong or where they don't belong. And so what I like to do for them as an active learning activity is, and to promote this problem solving, is to present them with an assignment, with a writing assignment that has errors built in, because they're at this advanced stage now. And I say, okay, we're going to do some seek and find. And then I also let them pair up in groups. I've had an activity where they're listening to a song and they're putting in the words that they hear. We need to also include spelling. So there's a lot of different ways we can do an assignment like this to promote our problem solving. Okay. And in turn, all this is creating an environment where curiosity, it's a powerful driving force for students to continually seek challenges and design solutions. And we're going to talk in a bit about questioning and how that's going to be our basis for our environment where this curiosity is so powerful. So how do we get to that place? So we have, first and foremost, setting instructor expectations. We want our students to participate. How are we going to get there? So participation, it can be difficult to measure. I think a lot of classes have participation grades, especially in our foreign language courses or those skills-based courses. You may have a participation grade, and there are different methods about going about participation. Well, we can also start by setting expectations beforehand. We can look at KPIs or metrics to help quantify our participation and assist us as educators in developing new strategies to design our courses, our activities, and our initiatives that are going to incorporate student feedback. So a few metrics that can help us quantify the student performance can include activity engagement rates, material retention, student activity and peer-to-peer collaboration, and attendance. So some of these can happen in the classroom or outside of the classroom, and you can collect this data as you go. And in the following semesters, you can use that data. So if you have access to this data in any shape or form, maybe you just have an idea of the collaboration that you're seeing from your students, or maybe you have the attendance on record. You can start there and build off of that as a background as you plan your active learning activities. And something that's really neat here is getting a program that can give you that data, that information. This is a screenshot from Campus Not itself, and this is the report that it gives to the instructor. So on the right-hand side with interactions and content, I find those would be a great place to start for setting expectations as well. You can see how many students interacted. You can see the content, what was their favorite. So when you go into making more activities for them or for future classes, you can build off of what you can see they're already engaged with. So then we get in the classroom where we want to know what are some of the best practices for facilitating participation. So you all will be sent, I believe you'll be sent this PowerPoint slide so you can really dive into all of these. And I'm going to hit on a couple that I find particularly impactful here to facilitate participation. So students need an environment. We need to curate an environment. And all these 7 steps are different ways that we can curate an environment for our students to participate. So looking at number 5, I'm going to start with number 5. So I may go around here. Right in the middle is number 5. Students can self-assess their own participation. I find this one quite interesting because oftentimes we put it on ourselves as educators to assess their participation. We can also have students self-assess. We can do this through self-assessment rubrics, or we can even have students set up their own participation goals that they can track. So the source article that's linked, that's cited there at the bottom, it talks as well about self-assessment through those goals as ways that students can set something just very basic for themselves. If they're more of a shy student or someone who just needs that extra boost every now and then, they can boost themselves with a simple goal such as, I will raise my hand once in class this week, or I will raise my hand once per class period. Something that's tangible and that they can really measure. And once they've achieved that goal, we can encourage them to set the next goal. We can do check-ins with our students as well on their own participation throughout the semester. So doing check-ins about their participation, you can do this through a poll. We'll talk in a little bit about polls, live polls in class. You can do it a live poll in class or after class, where if you want them to sit down a little bit and really think about how they feel their participation has been, you can do that as well. And you want to also feel, number 4, they want to feel that the lecture isn't the sole medium for discussions. I find this one also very important for us to be aware of. We are there presenting the material, we're teaching them, but we want to make sure that they don't feel we're thinking for them or that we're the only place that the ideas are coming from. So students mingling among their peers can help them adjust. They can feel that little boost of confidence just to speak to their neighbor, get some ideas from their neighbor, let them sort out their ideas, kind of take a step back. And you'll start to see more and more the students getting a little more confident, a little more wanting to share their ideas, put themselves out there. Okay, so let's go ahead to the next slide. So then we get to student questions. Hopefully we've built an environment where students feel empowered to ask their questions, no matter what. Ask any question you want. That's the feeling I want my students to have. So class time, time constraints, material density, all of these things, they could potentially affect how questions are handled, whether we have the time to really dive in. Regardless, we need to focus on taking just a moment of time on their questions, at least, if we don't have time to do a deep dive. Because oftentimes it's how the questions are handled for our students that can affect whether or not they continue that self-motivated learning through participation. It's very quick to even accidentally dash their confidence from a question that they've asked. So some of my tips for questions to, again, keep that environment going, that empowerment environment participation being very important, is to first and foremost take a breath and a pause. You might get a question that's complex for the topic. I've always gotten them as well in foreign language classes when they're trying to discover and learn more about cultures and their languages and all these connections that they're making. Sometimes their questions can be complicated or complex. And I like to just take a breath and a pause if that happens. And when we do that, we're showing the students, I'm engaged with your question, but we're also giving ourselves the time to think, how are we going to answer this in a way that is very productive for the rest of the class and for them? I like to also use grounding phrases. For example, let's explore that. Good question. Any sort of phrase that you like to keep in your tool belt for questions that might need a little bit of help answering something that, again, is a complex question. You can also rephrase the question. It's another tactic that I like to use to give that bit of a pause to show the student I'm engaged, and then we're also working on this together. And then finally, thank the student for asking their questions. You can do this in any case. So, I mean, students even ask questions about what page are we on? What page are we on? And then, it might be on the slideshow up there. And they say, well, thank you for asking that question. I'm sure others had that question as well. We're on page 46 or so. And so the full spectrum of questions, I always like to thank the students and keep them going. I want them to ask me everything, anything and everything. Okay, so let's go ahead to the next slide. And so that'll wrap up for my portion. I'm going to hand it back to Blake so we can talk a bit about technology.
Sure. Thank you, Arianne. And so first, I want to run a poll to show the best ways for determining if students are understanding material. I want to understand how you feel about this. So we'll take a minute here just to go through this, and then I'll continue talking about how you can use technology to really create that optimal environment for students. All right, we have some answers coming in here. All right, we'll give it about 20 more seconds. Get your answers in when you can. All right. So this is quite the spread here. So, taking a look at this, you can see there's a lot of different variations people will try to see if students are understanding the material. And I find it interesting that the body language of the whole class was the number one. And it makes sense. You're looking out at students and trying to get the feel of what they're thinking. Instead of that, the best idea would be to know what they're thinking and to use technology like I'm about to discuss to be able to do that, to ask them questions, get those snippets of content out there. With that said, some of you even mentioned that you'd like to be able to do it in a confidential or anonymous way. I'm going to also go over how that's something that can be absolutely powerful. So thank you all for your answers. So yes, so back to the question, how can technology help? So I know in the past couple of years, you've probably been inundated with technology from all over the place thrown at you, trying to figure out how to run your courses most effectively, how this new wave of students, how do you optimally, present to them and get them to engage with you. And with that said, it's about finding the right technology. It's about finding the technology that's focused on what your end goals are. And as far as participation goes, Campus Knot is a participation tool. And it's designed to really engage students and track that student involvement that Arianne spoke about earlier, where you can get those metrics and you can act on them. And we show you how to act on them. So when it comes to critical thinking, having those poll questions that were mentioned, and just like the polls in this webinar, it's very, very engaging to have those little snippets, those pieces that will engage the student in the moment, but also allow you to reflect back on it even week by week and make adjustments as necessary. And we found that students also need the same thing. And it's something that can truly help them critically think because they're actively engaged with the course and the content that you're sharing. And you can do these things. You can create these types of this optimal environment for participation by using things like a feed-based environment. For example, CampusNot has a feed-based feed feature tab that allows you to ask questions to students, start those discussions, bring ideas to students, and allow them to bring ideas to you and each other. So that peer-to-peer learning that we talked about earlier is very important. When they feel like that they're not the ones that are they're only focused on the discussion coming through the instructor, it feels less dynamic. When it's coming from their peers, it can encourage them and make them feel empowered in their learning. And that's what we found to be extremely powerful is having ways that you can automate this and make it easy for you to increase that engagement quickly. As we mentioned before, polls are extremely important for tracking that performance, getting their minds in the right place in the moment. And that's really a key element of especially this generation of students. But beyond that, the ability to reward students for participating in these activities. When it comes to giving students points, how do you do that easily without overwhelming you, especially if you have a lot of students? That's where automation comes in handy. That's where technology can really help, is streamlining the ability for you to not take too much time and energy to make something big happen when it comes to participation. Lastly, with CampusNot, there's also an attendance feature because students can't participate with you if they're not present with you. So whether you are a distance instructor or you are teaching in person or a mixture of both, which is very common now, it's very important that students are present. It's a key factor towards students being successful, and I'm sure you all know this. But CampusNot allows you to not only track this, but reward them for attending class, and blending all of these things together in a tool that really creates that optimal environment quickly for you. So this is something that we'd love to share with all of you. Like I said, we will be sending this recording of this webinar with you to you, but along with that, we do want to provide with you an ability to connect directly with us for us to show you not only the specific activities that you can run, like Dr. Armstrong talked about with getting students to critically think, but also what Arianne talked about with creating that active learning environment and creating those opportunities for discovery. We provide a tool that allows you to do that. And actually, Dr. Armstrong and Dr. Hainsey, you both are users of CampusNot. And I do want to ask you how you use it. I'd like you to share with the audience how you've used it, how it's helped you achieve some of the things we talked about today.
Well, I guess I could go first. I like to know if my students are ready for an advanced topic. So I've used CampusNot before to assess things as simple as, did you get a chance to read the case study before today? Just a yes or no. I've asked them, what was the target behavior for the intervention discussed in the example I asked you to look at for today? And give them a multiple choice and just see, what percent of the class is either guessing right or actually knows. And then I've also gone more to using the feed-based approach, the short answer, trying to get them to think through some things. Specific example, behavior modification class. There's 3 times when we can do something about behavior: before, during, and after. The before part are for antecedent control strategies, and the after parts for consequence-based strategies. And then usually during behavior, you have a wider range of options, be it prompts or shaping or whatever. But I've asked them before, like antecedent strategies for having people not drink and drive. Most of your college students have been to parties, and whether they're drinkers or not, they've been around people drinking. And how do you make, how can you use antecedent strategies to reduce drinking and driving and get them to start listing things? And it really helps that concept come alive for my class when they can start doing things at their desk. And I think this is important that before I started doing the surveying of class using electronics, I was kind of dependent on the loudest students or the ones that I was most likely to call on. My sampling was very limited. And if I can pose a question that literally everybody has to answer, the shyest people get a voice. The people who maybe are hesitant to be acknowledged in front of their classmates get a voice. And I love that. I really want to make sure everybody's got a chance to go on record with an idea or thought. And so I use it oftentimes to make sure I'm engaging the quieter group out there, the ones that I'm less engaged with personally.
Yes, so for me, I've used it in more of an asynchronous manner, but I used it for getting feedback from my students and how they felt the semester went, and not only how did it go, but what did they gain from it? And I used a variety of questions. So I used the open-end question for them. I wanted to ask them what their favorite topic was throughout the semester. So this was for a literature seminar. And then I also asked them some multiple choice questions, would you recommend this course? So just getting general feedback. And then I asked them some feedback questions that were multiple answer. So I asked them, which topic do you wish we had more time to explore? So this is going to help me plan in the future as well. So I used it as a metric for myself. And not only that, I also used it in the beginning of the semester for my students to get them all acquainted. And I asked them a word cloud question of, what's your favorite candy? And they just put 1 or 2 words and it pops up on the word cloud and we can start to see what everyone's favorite candy is. Why not? And so that gives also a more relaxed environment to show that, just show what, just as fun, just for fun, right? So you can use it in all manner of ways. And I also appreciate too that it's a scrolling feature. So it's just really a really nice thing for our students who are used to scrolling, who are used to that sort of visual technological element.
If I can add that, the purpose of today wasn't so much a demonstration of Campus Not. We can't really do that easily through Zoom. But it's to give you an idea about the kinds of tools that could be there if you decide to click on the link and look a little more closely. But you have control over what your students will see regarding their classmates' responses and when they're going to see them. And that's a very important feature if you want to make sure that you're trying to avoid groupthink, or you don't want the most dominating students to steer the discussion straight out of the gate. You want to make sure that everybody has a chance to respond before you start revealing responses. So I like that feature too. Let's see, I had another example of using the short answer, the feed option. And that was, sometimes I'll present a case to my students in a behavior therapy or behavior modification class. And I'll say to them, okay, we've got a 4th grader who is self-injuring, and they're self-injuring during 4th grade math class. Now, before we break up into small groups and, right now, everybody ask a question that they need answered before they can start brainstorming about what to do about this. And so individually, prior to getting to a small group, they all got to respond. And then that kind of gets the neurons firing, and that gives them a chance to then go to the small group with everybody having something to contribute. And just trying to get engagement, especially from that bottom third of students who are very reluctant or shy or don't have the confidence, et cetera.
Thank you both for, oh, sorry, Anna, you go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. We actually have a few questions on the Q&A section that I would like to address. But thanks, Arianne and Dr. Armstrong, for sharing some of your experiences in the past and teaching, your different types of courses. But I do want to go ahead and ask, one of the questions that we had posted on the Q&A session was about share with us some practical steps to take to get students sort of motivated and starting to interact more in the class. Can one of you share with us some examples of steps that as instructors we can go ahead and take right away to get students participating in the class?
I know one of my favorite go-to things is that students don't like to be wrong in front of each other. So I try not to create situations where they have to be right in order to play. And one great example of that is by asking them, hey, before we can really hit this, what questions do you have? Give me an example of a question that you think would be good to answer before you can really tackle this problem that's coming up in the course. And so their job is to come up with a question rather than an answer. And it'll be a little bit easier for them to get started because they don't have to answer it. And you could even kind of put another spin on it and just say, give me an example of a question that you think a classmate might have right now that might be helpful to getting started on this issue.
Perfect. Thank you
I
so
really
much.
like that. Yeah, and I would also add something that you can do off the bat is I mentioned the word cloud with their favorite candy. Well, you can also use word clouds in other ways to promote their sense of curiosity in a very quick way, something that's just a word or two. So what are your feelings on this topic? You can ask them, how are you feeling today? You can ask all manner of questions. I've even had them say, okay, put your favorite emoji in there. And you get some funny responses. And for me, it's just about creating that lighthearted atmosphere for my students as well, because we are in those foreign language classes, we're in a very exposing environment, right? They're learning a new mode of communication. So I want them to feel at ease and feel like they're ready to ask those questions and just dive into learning language.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I also have another question here that just popped up, and that is about the type of resources that you guys have used in the past that you think that have been so helpful to encourage students to participate in the class. Could you share with us either resources or activities that have worked for the both of you?
Sure, I could start that one. So resources that encourage participation. Well, that was one of my main pillars for foreign language classes. I need them to participate and get in there. Lots of active learning activities. The one that immediately comes to mind is anything where they get to walk around the classroom and do a signature activity. So for that, they might, and it would be in their target language, and it'll say different phrases related to what we're learning. So if we're learning about activities, free time activities, it might say, I play guitar, or I like to sew, and they have to find people by conversing with them in that language. So that, for me, doing activities like that where they're forced to engage, but in a way that relates to them or that they can relate it back to themselves, that's where I'm seeing a lot of engagement and participation. So you can find resources like that. There's lots of open educational resources that can provide activities like that. You also have teachers pay teachers. So anything you're looking for to get those students engaged, I definitely recommend those types of classroom activities. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 15 minutes. Yeah.
I have a couple of, I don't know, the things that I've looked at include, Microsoft has a survey feature built into Office. Google has a survey app. I've also used Polls Everywhere. I have used Slido. I've tried a variety of things, and honestly, it kind of comes down to what integrates with your environment, and what are your students able and willing to put on their phones or laptops or iPads. And I think there's some advantage to you guys of thinking about your particular institution's technical support, and in terms of what software it's investing in. For us at Mississippi State, we have an investment in Campus Not and are working with them to try and get integration in with the grade book and some other features. And I think that's a really exciting part. Every time I've done talks, if I do like Slido, they all got to download it and go to a web page, and some of them like that and some of them don't. And if I use Google Sheets or Microsoft Office, some of them don't like those sites. They don't want to give up their personal information or something. And what I like about Campus Not for the future is that it's in our Canvas environment, and they're dedicated to improving and integrations with other Canvas apps.
I would be remiss to mention as well online education, since that is my specialty. And like I mentioned earlier, you can use Campus Not, and I think Blake also mentioned this, you can use it online. But if you're also looking for other tools like video interactivity, if you're using Canvas, you can use Canvas Studio to have video interaction to promote engagement online and promote curiosity online. You can use Canvas Studio, and I've also used another third-party app called Edpuzzle. So it's a video hosting. You can add quizzes and all that good stuff to a video to make it interactive. So that's especially helpful for online, but you can use it for your face-to-face as well. You could use it in the classroom. You could have a short video that they interact with.
Yeah, thank you guys for sharing with us all of this very helpful and insightful information. But I think that will wrap up our talk for today. So thank you so much for attending. I do want to remind you all that you will receive a recorded version of our webinar in a few hours, and as well as a slideshow with activities that you can implement immediately, as well as a $5 Starbucks gift card and the certificate of attendance. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. If you do want to learn more about Campus Not and what we have to offer, feel free to schedule a 20-minute session with one of our team members. We're super excited to share with you a couple of ideas that we know can be helpful to you in the future. But thank you, Dr. Armstrong. Thank you, Arianne, and thank you, Blake, for joining us today. And to all of our attendees, happy holidays to you all. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Enjoyed it.